In this lesson, we're going to start creating our very first script in our game. Now, once we start getting all our scripts put together, this is where our game, our art, and our functionality is just going to come together, and we're going to have some playable features here. So this is where we can start adding some really cool ideas and power to what we're doing. So I'm going to be typing common phrases, and it's going to be completely new to you. And that might overwhelm you at first, but you're going to see as we move on with the course, these phrases are going to keep popping up. Very common phrases like hello, nice to meet you, hello, just very common things in a new language. You're going to see it over and over again, and you're just going to start to recognize, and you'll be able to do it. You just have to put forth a little bit of effort in the beginning, learn some basics, and you'll be able to just blast through your own games, no problem. Enough said there. Let's just get cracking at seeing how we can create our very first script within Unity and what that looks like. I'm going to go down to my assets folder here, and I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to title this scripts. You can title it whatever you wish, but that's just what I'm going to call it. I'm going to go inside here, going to right click, create C# script. Again, that's the language that will be going on with this course here. And now when you first create it, it's going to be open up here to title it whatever you wish. So this script is going to be our character movement. So I'm going to say character movement. Bam. All right. And just double click on this and you'll see mono develop for the very first time. All right. And then when you open up your first script in Unity, this is what it looks like. Every script's going to look the exact same. So what we have here, we have these first 3 lines you don't really need to worry about. We're not going to make any changes within this course. It's kind of just like laying the foundation for our script. These 2 lines just import a series of functions that we're going to be using so the script can review and recognize them. And this public class is just saying this is the name of our script, character movement, and everything within this open and this close bracket, you'll see it highlights when I select one of them. It says, all right, that's the beginning, this is the end. Whatever we type within these brackets is all contained within our script here. And every script comes with 2 base functions within Unity. You can see there's also comments here kind of telling you what it does. Void start. Every function has an open and closed bracket, and you always want to type within those to let you know that whatever you're typing to do is within this function. So I always like to restructure it. I'm going to click spacebar so now I can kind of more clearly see whatever I type just between these 2 brackets, start and beginning. Void update. I'm going to do the same thing. Start and update, just like that, so I know if I want to type it in the start function, it's going to be in those brackets. If I want to type in the update, it's going to be within those. And just a quick overview of what the heck void start and what void update is. Now void start will perform whatever you type in here as soon as this script is initialized. So if your game object that the script is applied to is first time used or awakened at any point in the game, whenever that moment happens, that's when whatever you type in here is going to happen. So it's going to be like a one-off type thing. And void update is constantly looking. Every frame that your game is being played or rendered, it's going to be constantly checking whatever you have typed in here and performing those actions. Alright, so now you've seen what the script kind of overview is, and for all you brave ones still watching, let's start digging in and creating this script here. So the first step to creating our character movement script is going to be creating variables. And you've probably heard me say the word variable a few times so far, and you're wondering, what is this? Well, a variable basically said is just a container that you create within your script to hold, could be a dynamic piece of information. For example, we're going to be creating one for walking speed. So we're going to create a container to hold a value to apply to our speed that can be changing within our gameplay. So let's go ahead and start creating the variables for our walking script. So to create a variable, you want to go above your functions. Just at the top of your class is kind of the most commonly used area. So I'm going to comment out. To make a comment, you just do 2 forward slashes. Oops. 2 forward slashes, and whatever you write after that's going to be a comment. It's not going to be read by Unity when it's trying to analyze your code. So it's just for your own visual reference. I'm going to say walking variables. Alright, so now we're going to create the variables underneath this comment here so we know what these variables relate to. It's just a nice way to reference back to your script later on. So walking variables. So first off, what type of variables change as you're walking? Well, first off, we have our walking speed. That's going to change. And what else do we have here? How about the direction that we're facing? Direction. See what happens if you don't put the 2 comments there. It's not going to make it as a comment. Character is facing. What else changes? How about the direction? Our character is moving. All right, so I've just kind of commented out what type of variables we need to make this walk happen. So let's go about making, I'm going to type out the first variable here, and then I'll break it down for you afterwards so you can see the structure of it. So for our walking speed, let's create that variable now. Let's go public, and this is going to be a float value, and it's going to be walk speed. And I'm going to tab out here, and I'm just going to say equals, let's start out with a value of 10. All right, so we've just now created our very first variable, which is going to contain our walking speed for our character. So now, that looks very different, but remember, this is a different language, right? So you're going to get totally used to this as we go on. The first thing that you see, public. Why did I type public? This is what's called our access modifier. How does our game access this variable? Is it going to be public or is it going to be private? And when you put a public variable, that means this variable, our walking speed, it can be accessed from any other script that we create in our game later on, and also you can make adjustments in our Unity Inspector window with the object selected that this script is on. You'll see that later, and we can make changes to that. So I want to be dynamically changing my walking speed from other scripts and within the user interface for testing. So I'm going to create this publicly. If I was to do this privately, the only way I could change it would be within this script, hard-coded. I couldn't go in and access it from another script. I couldn't go in and change it with my user interface. So I'm going to keep it public. Now what is float? Float is our type of information we want this variable to hold. Now a floating point number is basically a decimal number. So I want to create a decimal number to hold the value of my speed. So moving on, walk speed. Walk speed, all I did was just name the variable at this point. So whenever you're naming a variable, you want to use what's called camel casing. This is very common, basically a standard within all programming. When you're creating a variable, the first word, no spaces between your words, and you can create the variable any name you want, but I just highly recommend you start the first word with a lowercase, next word with an uppercase letter. That way when you're using all your logic code, you have all these lines of code, you know what's a variable in your code and what's a function, because functions will always be started with a capital, variables with a lowercase, next word with a capital. That's camel casing. And then I just tabbed out, you don't have to, you can put this any amount of space. I just do it so I can cleanly tab out all my values to all my variables on the same line, so I'm not zigzagging my eyes as I'm reading down the list there. And because this is a floating point type variable, I created a floating point number, just a decimal number, and then I just put the word F at the end. You always do that on the end of a floating point number. It just helps Unity read and understand. You could just do a decimal number without the F, but you might get an error or two. I've never really gone too hard into that, so I just know it's best practice to put an F at the end of a floating point number. And you always use a semicolon to end a statement whenever you're coding. So let's move on and create our next variable. So I'm going to go direction we're facing. So I'm going to go public, so I can see it in the interface. Bool, type bool. I'm going to say forward. Tab out a couple times. And I'm going to title this true. And semicolon to end that, because it's the end of our statement, right? So public, now this is different. Hold on a sec. Bool. What is a bool type variable? A bool type variable is simply true or false. And I have to use this in my logic to detect which direction he's facing. So bool, I'm going to set to true because we start our game and our character is facing forward. And as soon as he turns to move in the other direction, I want to set that to false so I can logically use that in some statements you'll see below in our script as we continue. So that's our script there. Now moving on, I'm going to create our move direction. So public float move camel casing direction, and I'm going to tab out, and you know what? I'm not even going to give this a value because we're going to be inputting information into that. So I'm going to just put a semicolon and end that. So there we go. We have our walking variables here. And what I'm going to do is I'm all about cleanliness here, so I'm going to tab these out one, just so they're separated from my main comment up there. Just want to keep this as clean as possible for you guys so it's easy for you to read. So there we go. We have all of our walking variables. And now just a quick review here. I've commented out so I know what's going on. Commented each variable. You guys can put any description you like, just whatever helps you. I always do that so you know what these things are doing, because you're going to come back to us at the end of your game and say, I want to adjust this, but which one was it? You want to be able to know. It's very, very, very crucial. So now I'm just going to create some space, clean it up. And now you can see that MonoDevelop has an empty circle up here. That means you've made changes to your script but you haven't saved. So I'm just going to Command S. There we go. Now we get the X. That means our script is saved. Alright, so it's time to move on to our next lesson, where we're going to get a little bit further into scripting and see how we can use these variables to apply some movement to our character. I'll see you there.